People think betrayal arrives with noise. A phone ringing at the wrong moment. A name slipping out accidentally. A secret that trips over itself. But real betrayal is far more intelligent than that. It studies your routine. Learns your blind spots. Waits until you are comfortable. And then it enters. Politely. He started mentioning a name. Not often. Not casually. Carefully. A colleague. A professional connection. Someone I was never meant to fear. She's good at what she does, he said once. Without looking up. That was all. No excitement. No emotion. Just information. And yet, something in his tone felt rehearsed. When a name enters a marriage softly, it's usually already been loud elsewhere. I told myself not to overthink. We live in a city. We work with people. We interact. Suspicion is for insecure women. They say. And I had never been that woman. I had my own life. My own career. My own confidence. So I nodded. I smiled. I trusted. Because trust, once broken, cannot be repaired easily. I didn't know yet how fragile it already was. He became lighter outside the apartment. I noticed it in small ways. His voice sounded freer on calls. His laughter less restrained. His shoulders relaxed. When he spoke to someone who wasn't me. When he came home. That lightness stayed outside. Like he had already used up his emotional energy for the day. And I was left with the leftovers. Our conversations changed. They became transactional. Did you eat? Did you see that message? Can you pass me that? Efficient. Civil. Empty. Marriage should be many things. But it should never feel like customer service. One evening, I reached for his phone. Not secretly. Not suspiciously. Just to move it off the sofa. He reacted instantly. Too instantly. His hand moved faster than thought. I've got it, he said. Smiling. Always smiling. And in that moment, something inside me went quiet. Because loyalty doesn't panic. That night, I lay beside him, staring at the ceiling. The city outside was alive. Cars moved. Lights blinked. Lives continued. And there I was. Next to a man I loved. Feeling like a guest. Who had stayed too long. I wanted to ask questions. But questions change things. Once you ask, you can't pretend you didn't feel. And I wasn't ready to watch my perfect life collapse under honesty. So I stayed silent. Again. The name appeared again. This time, with a story. She understands the pressure, he said. She's been through similar things. And I realized something painful. He was sharing emotions with someone else. Not secrets. Not intimacy. But understanding. And emotional betrayal doesn't need touch. It only needs connection. I started noticing my absence. From his stories. He spoke about his day. Like I wasn't part of his world. Like I lived parallel to him. Not with him. And that's when I understood. Someone else had become his listener. Someone else had become the place he rested his thoughts. And I was still there. Cooking, supporting, loving. Completely unaware that my role had already been replaced. I didn't confront him. Not yet. Because part of me was still hoping. This was a phase. A misunderstanding. A test. But deep down, a quiet voice whispered, "You are not imagining this." And once that voice speaks, a woman is never the same again. There comes a moment in every woman's life when denial becomes heavier than truth. For me, it didn't arrive with evidence. It arrived with exhaustion. I was tired of explaining his silence to myself. Tired of translating distance into maturity. Tired of being understanding while feeling misunderstood. Loyalty, when unreturned, doesn't make you noble. It makes you lonely. He began protecting his time. Not aggressively. Strategically. Meetings that ran long. Errands that didn't need company. Phone calls taken in another room. And every explanation made sense. That's what hurt the most. When betrayal is careless, you can expose it. When it is careful, it educates you to doubt your own intelligence. One evening, I asked him to sit with me. Not to talk. Just to be present. We sat side by side. On the same sofa. Where distance had learned how to live between us. I rested my head lightly against his shoulder. He didn't move away. But he didn't lean in either. That space. That frozen neutrality. Felt colder than rejection. I said his name. Softly. The way you call someone you still love. He answered. But his attention stayed elsewhere. I was speaking to a body whose mind had already committed elsewhere. And something inside me broke cleanly. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just, completely. That night, I stopped defending him in my thoughts. I stopped saying, he's just stressed. I stopped saying, it's nothing serious. I stopped giving him excuses he had never asked for. Because when a man wants to stay, he doesn't drift. He anchors. The next day, I watched him more closely. Not as a suspicious wife, but as a woman who had finally removed hope from her eyes. And clarity arrived. Like a sharp inhale. He smiled differently when his phone vibrated. He softened when reading messages that were not from me. He became lighter when I was not in the room. And that's when I knew I wasn't competing with another woman. I was competing with how he felt when he wasn't with me. I remembered the woman I used to be. Confident. Grounded. Certain of her place. Marriage had not diminished me. But it had made me quieter than I deserved to be. And I realized something painful. Betrayal doesn't just break trust. It teaches a woman to disappear gracefully. I went into the bedroom and looked at our reflection in the mirror. 2 adults. 2 lives. 1 shared space. But only one of us was still emotionally present. I straightened my posture. Adjusted my curls. And for the first time in a long while, I spoke to myself honestly. You deserve to be chosen. Not tolerated. I didn't confront him yet. Not because I was afraid. But because I wanted to be prepared. There is power in waiting until your heart is steady enough to hear the truth. And I knew, once I asked the question, our marriage would never sound the same again. That night, he reached for me in sleep. A habit. Muscle memory. I didn't move. Not out of punishment. Out of clarity. Because I was no longer willing to receive affection that arrived after someone else had already taken his attention. I turned toward the window. City lights blinked steadily unaware that a marriage was quietly approaching its moment of reckoning. And I made a promise to myself. If betrayal was real, I would not beg. I would not chase. I would not shrink. I would face it with the same dignity. I brought into the marriage that I didn't plan the conversation. I didn't rehearse it in my head or wait for the perfect moment. Because when truth demands space, it doesn't ask for permission. We were in the kitchen. Nothing dramatic. Just clean counters. Soft light. The ordinary setting of a life people believed was unbreakable. He was speaking about something unimportant. And suddenly, I realized I wasn't listening anymore. I was watching him. Watching the ease in his movements. The calm in his voice. The confidence of a man who believed he was still unseen. And that's when I asked, is there someone else you share your thoughts with? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I didn't even look angry. I asked like a woman who was finally ready to hear the answer that he froze. Not completely. Just enough. Just a pause. Too long to be innocent. Then he smiled. That same controlled smile I had learned to fear. Why would you ask that? And there it was. The deflection. A question meant to make me explain my intuition. Instead of him explaining his behavior, I feel distant from you, I said. Carefully. Truthfully. I feel like you are emotionally present. Somewhere else. He exhaled slowly. Like a man preparing to manage a situation. You're overthinking, he said. You know how work can be. And for a brief moment, the old me wanted to accept that. Wanted to apologize. Wanted to restore peace. At my own expense. But I stayed still. I'm not asking about work, I said. I'm asking about connection. Silence stretched between us. Heavy. Uncomfortable. And then he said something that cut deeper than confession. She understands me, he said quietly. Not loves. Not touches. Not meets. Understands. I felt my chest tighten. Not with anger. With grief. Because understanding was something I had offered him. For years. Listened without judgment. Supported without demand. Loved without conditions. And somewhere along the way, he had taken that gift to someone else. Do you talk to her about us? I asked. He didn't answer immediately. And that hesitation was the loudest truth I had heard all year. It's not what you think, he said finally. We're just talking. But emotional betrayal doesn't need permission. It only needs access. I nodded. Not because I agreed, but because something inside me had settled. The uncertainty was gone. Painful clarity had taken its place. And clarity, as cruel as it is also freeing. I need honesty, I said. Not begging. Not pleading. I need to know if our marriage still has your heart. He looked at me then. Really looked. And for the first time, I didn't see certainty in his eyes, that I saw conflict. And that told me everything. I don't know, he said. 2 words. Soft. Devastating. The kind that don't echo loudly, but stay with you forever. I didn't cry. Not then. Because something remarkable happened in that moment. I stopped trying to hold us together alone. Marriage cannot survive on one loyal heart. That I turned away and rested my hands on the counter. Grounded myself. Breathed. When I faced him again, my voice was steady. Then I will not fight. For something you are unsure about. And I meant it. He looked surprised. Not because he didn't care, but because he didn't expect strength. Betrayal often assumes a woman will collapse. I didn't. That night, we slept on the same bed as two people who finally acknowledged the truth between them. No shouting. No drama. Just the quiet understanding that something sacred had been damaged, possibly beyond repair. I lay awake, listening to the city breathe, and I realized the hardest part wasn't losing him. It was finding myself again. After slowly stepping aside for someone else's comfort. After truth is spoken, everything sounds different. The apartment didn't change, but it felt smaller. The silence between us was no longer confused. It was informed. He tried to stay. Not loudly. Not dramatically. In the careful way men do. When they realize they may lose something they assumed was permanent. He became attentive again. Asked questions. Offered help. Sat closer. But there was a difference. This attention had fear in it. And love should never be fueled by fear of consequence. I don't want to lose us, he said once. And I believed him. But belief alone is not repair. Because I had learned something painful. You can miss someone and still not choose them fully. He explained. Carefully selected words. Soft justifications. He said he felt unheard. Unseen. Under pressure. He said the connection had just happened. After truth is spoken, everything sounds different. The apartment didn't change, but it felt smaller. The silence between us was no longer confused. It was informed. He tried to stay. Not loudly. Not dramatically. In the careful way men do. When they realize they may lose something they assumed was permanent. He became attentive again. Asked questions. Offered help. Sat closer. But there was a difference. This attention had fear in it. And love should never be fueled by fear of consequence. I don't want to lose us, he said once. And I believed him. But belief alone is not repair. Because I had learned something painful. You can miss someone and still not choose them fully. He explained. Carefully selected words. Soft justifications. He said he felt unheard. Unseen. Under pressure. He said the connection had just happened. As if emotional betrayal falls from the sky and lands on responsible men. I listened. I always listened. But this time, I didn't absorb his excuses. I examined them. And I realized every reason he gave was something he could have brought to me. But he didn't. I never touched her, he said. As if that was the standard. As if loyalty is only physical. As if marriage vows end at the body. I nodded slowly. Then you gave her everything else, I replied. And that was the first time. He had no answer. Something in him shifted then. He saw it. Not the affair. But the cost. The woman who had been patient. Understanding. Emotionally available. Was no longer negotiating her worth. I didn't rush to leave. I didn't rush to forgive. I watched. Watched how he tried to rebuild trust without truly dismantling. The connection that broke it. And that told me everything. Because repair requires sacrifice. And he still wanted to lose nothing. One evening, I stood alone. By the window. City lights reflected against the glass. And I asked myself the hardest question a woman can ask. If nothing changed from this moment on, could I live this life without shrinking? The answer arrived. Quietly. But clearly. I had not lost myself in this marriage. But I had paused myself. Dimmed myself. Adjusted myself. And I was done living in adjustment mode. I didn't leave angrily. I didn't leave dramatically. I left honestly. I love you, I told him. And I meant it. But I love myself enough to walk away from a place where I am no longer chosen. With certainty. He didn't argue. That hurt more than shouting. Because deep down, he knew. We divided life gently. Conversations were calm. Voices respectful. The city continued outside. Indifferent to endings. And I realized something powerful. You don't need chaos for a marriage to end. Sometimes clarity is enough. I moved into my own space. Not extravagant. Just peaceful. A place where my thoughts didn't have to compete for attention. I rediscovered silence. The healthy kind. The kind that heals instead of wounds. People asked questions. They always do. What happened? You two were perfect. I smiled. Because perfection is often just privacy. And I had learned not to explain my healing to people who only admired my endurance. I returned to myself, to my confidence, my style, my laughter. I wore my curls freely again. Not to be seen, but because I felt seen by myself. Sometimes, I think of him. Not with bitterness. But with understanding. He didn't betray me loudly. He betrayed me quietly. And that taught me the most important lesson of my life. Love is not proven by how long you stay. It is proven by how fully you choose someone every day. If you are listening to this and recognizing yourself, know this. You are not too sensitive. You are not imagining things. And you are not asking for too much. You are asking the wrong person for the right things. I am a middle-aged African woman. Stylish. Grounded. Whole. I loved deeply. I stayed loyally. And when it mattered most, I chose myself. Without losing my grace. And that is not a failure. That is a victory.